Hello and welcome to the Recovery Crew, folks. I'm looking at my screen here, and I have Camille, Reid, and Robert Park is in the house. I'm Dr. Bob Beare, and this is the Deep Waters Recovery podcast. We call it the Recovery Crew, and so we have the great honor today to Robert's going to tell his story, and I'll say a little bit more about his bio here in a minute in case you don't know who he is. But anyway, that's my way of saying hello, Camille. Hello, Robert.
Hey.
Hey, Bob.
Why don't we start with Camille? Why don't you let folks know what Deep Waters is and what we're up to here, and then I'll introduce Robert and let you launch.
Yeah, so at Deep Waters, we are an advanced recovery and healing experience for men and women in the Austin, Texas area. We have the Deep Waters Intensive, or the DWI, which is a 3-day transformational trauma resolution experience that integrates psychodrama, bioenergetics, and rituals of empowerment. That's going to be happening later this year. And then our upcoming experiential facilitators training, or EFT, is an opportunity for anyone who works with others to do their own inner work and learn action tools that they can use in groups. You can also get on a certification track for that so that you can lead the Deep Waters Intensive. And you can find all that info at deepwatersrecovery.com. And then we also have an outpatient program where individuals can work with Dr. Bob and his colleagues in groups, individuals, couples, and family sessions. Our weekly blogs come out on Mondays, and then the podcasts come out on Friday, and you can like, follow, share, subscribe on YouTube, all of it. And then you can also follow Bob on TikTok as a recovery and trauma guy.
Yep.
For a laugh.
I'm having a blast over there. Robert, look at everybody smiles when that gets mentioned. Like, how could that old guy be on there? I'm the, what do I call myself on there? The
Wise Ass Therapy Solutions.
Yes, what? And yeah, anyway, it's
I like it.
I get to do my Larry David therapist impression. So, all right. So here we have Robert Park, just going to tell his story today, and we're going to probably learn something. Every time I've been with Robert, I know I'm with a person who's been. You ever run into somebody that nothing has ever happened to? Yeah. It's like, and you start falling asleep in the first 30 seconds. That has never been the case with Robert. Robert's been I'll let him frame it however he wants to, in the recovery addiction treatment world for coming up on a couple of decades. And I know he's worked with a lot of different treatment centers, has played different roles at those treatments, all of them. I think you've probably been in all of them.
There's a couple I haven't done, but for the most part, yeah.
Yeah. So, and now he is the owner and operator of Luna Recovery Services in Houston. Luna, that's Luna. I don't want to disparage anyone else. It's hard to say it this way, but Luna's doing the best work, doing the real deal combination between, giving the real solution for addiction, which is not, it can't be all 12-step recovery, and a real clinical solution, which cannot be all clinical. In order to treat addiction, you have to have a mature combination of the use of both of those, and it's not easy to pull off. And Robert has a team that is doing as good as anybody I know of. How did I say? Hey, I said that pretty good there.
That was perfect. Yeah, I'm gonna actually ask for this recording and put your video on my website.
Promo.
Yeah. Well, I'm telling. Sometimes when I tell the truth, every once in a while I tell the truth, and it sounds really good. All right. So anyway, Luna's great. Robert is a guy that has done a lot of deep work himself. I'll let you talk more about that. But anybody that puts holotropic breathwork on his bio says something about the person. Holotropic breathwork is a particular kind of deep trauma resolution processing that maybe we'll chat a little bit about before. But anyway, Robert, so glad you're here. I could go on about who you are and all the stuff that you've done, but why don't we just let you launch and tell us what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Yeah?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for the warm and gracious introduction. I appreciate that. Yeah, so I'm really happy to be here. This is kind of like something different and fun, and it's a good just a good change up. And so yeah, when the opportunity arose, I was like, yeah, let's do it. Yeah, so I've been sober for it'll be 17 years and 10 days, I guess. So it's always the month of June is always kind of like the darkest. It reminds me of just like kind of that final dark night of the soul, so to speak, that I had. But before that, there was a lot of fun,
It worked. It works until it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, right. And I grew up alcoholic home. My dad is sober now, but was an alcoholic cocaine addict, and my mom was a really good codependent, and my grandmother was an alcoholic. My older sister's an alcoholic. My younger sister's an alcoholic. My aunt on the other side of my family died of opiate addiction. I mean, so I've come by this very honestly. I didn't have a chance in hell, basically. I remember I really didn't want to be an alcoholic because I saw the devastation it did in my family, and so I decided to start smoking pot instead. And, that was natural and it came from the earth, and, it was just different. It was a little tidier and not as messy. And I remember the first time I really, really, gave pot an honest shot. I was with all these older kids who I always seemed to gravitate hanging out with the older kids. And they had a bong out called the Purple People Eater. And I remember having to excuse myself pretty quickly after a few rips of that thing. And, went home and just like shut myself in my room. And it honestly was not a great experience. But the following day, guess where I was? I was back at the Purple People Eater. Like, I want to try that again,
Yeah.
So that that really kind of started everything for me. And I did start to form a connection with myself, and definitely with the substance, and with the people. And so really, I think from that point forward, it was just like, yes, drugs, this is my way. And not a unique story there at all. You kind of hear that a lot, but that is my truth. And so I was never a good student. I barely passed middle school. They put me on Ritalin the last 3 months of school, and I made straight A's, but I just was never really all that interested in school or going to class, or I'd rather just have fun, and that was kind of what I was more into. And so, I benefited from having an older sister who also was using MDMA and drinking and smoking pot, among other things. And so I got to kind of hang out with her friends and partake in those substances as well. And so, I started listening to a couple bands in high school, Grateful Dead and Fish. And I mean, that like became my religion, it was just like, man, I just remember like all I wanted to do is like listen to shows and get high and just like sit there and just like enjoy it.
Somehow my guess is you weren't this clean cut looking dude following the Grateful Dead around.
No, I grew a beard as fast as I could, which I started shaving in the fifth grade. So it wasn't that hard.
We should have pictures on here.
You know what, Bob? There's not that many of them.
Didn't want the evidence.
Luckily, I got sober before like social media and all that stuff. Really, like I think we had MySpace maybe when I was, if that. But when I got sober, yeah, and so I just started exploring. I started taking some psilocybin and some LSD and things like that. And man, I mean, to be honest with you, like I really felt like I was figuring something out. I was like, everybody should take LSD. Like, I mean, the world would just be a better place, Yeah. And that still may be true. I don't know, but it's, you know, I remember being in Saturday Detention reading like Carlos Castaneda and, you know, like these metaphysical
Nice.
books, you know, in high school. And I was starting to really kind of explore some of that. And I didn't really have any structure or mentors or anything like that. I mean, I just kind of, I don't even know how I fell into it. Maybe it was through the dad, but, and so, you know, I often say I was really cool in high school. I mean, like really cool. I peaked, like that was like the peak of my coolness. It was like junior, senior year of high school.
Yeah.
I was the pot dealer for most of the schools, private schools and surrounding public schools in Houston. So I had my own apartment in high school. That
Developing your leadership skills early.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, entrepreneurial. And you know, and everybody, you know, it was just I had my own apartment, and we all go over there, and we'd skip class, and girls were into me at that point in my life. You know, it was just like I was kind of riding high, you know, and at the same time, if I wasn't high, which wasn't very often, I was angry, and I was short-tempered, and you know, would get in fights with my mom in particular. In hindsight, man, I was selfish and self-centered, you know, and the way I treated some of my relationships and the things I did to my friends and girls I was in a relationship with back then, you know, was pretty ugly, really. But you know, at the end, but I didn't have that awareness. I was just kind of like, it was all about me. I was so just wrapped up in my identity and, you know, my ego and all of that. So somehow I graduate high school. So this is kind of a funny story. You know, I had like so many absences that I had to go into my principal and say like, hey, is there any way I can graduate? You know, I got into college somehow. And she was like, well, you can run 2 miles every day after school for the last month, and that'll make up for your absences. I don't know if they would still do something like this now, but I was like, okay.
How does it?
So
what's the through line from missing classes to running? Just straight out punishment?
Punishment, I guess. Yeah. I mean, but I was willing to do it. I mean, you know, the coaches despised me. They're like, oh, Park. I just, you know, and that's who was, you know, overseeing my running, you know, deal. And so I'd show up, and, you know, for the first week, my stoner friends were like all across the street, like, you know, smoking joints, like, yeah, go around. I was like running across the track, you know. And finally the coach, you know, after like probably a week or two, the coach was just like, Park, just get out of here. Like he just, you know, he just gave me credit for it, and he just didn't want to deal with me. And, you know, frankly, that's how I got through life.
Yeah.
You know, all my teachers loved me. I didn't do shit, but they loved me, you know, and it's kind of how I learned how to navigate, you know, getting away with stuff. And, it worked until it didn't, but it worked at this point in my life. And so I applied to Colorado State University, mainly because they had really good pot in Colorado, and they have really good music, and it's in the mountains. And, you know, I had a beard and long hair at this point, and I was like, I belong in Colorado. And
Boulder, right?
Fort Collins.
Fort
Collins. I didn't get into Boulder. There's no way I was getting into that school, but I did get into Collins. On probation, mind you. And so I moved up there, and I went to class for a little while, lived in the dorm, and I found a pot supplier, because that's who I was. I was Rob the pot dealer, you know. So I was dealing pot out of my dorm room, and you know, I started drinking a lot more at this point. And using some other pharmaceuticals, and just kind of, you know, I wasn't all that picky, honestly. And started going to a lot of shows, lots of music. And all of a sudden, you know, I found myself, I'm all over the country. I'm living my dream. I'm traveling across the country, camping out, getting high, listening to good music, meeting interesting people. And, I'd run out of money, and I'd call my mom, or usually my dad, because my dad was an alcoholic and he felt guilty for all the stuff he put me through. And I knew that, and, at some level. And so, I could play on that guilt, right? And say, Dad, send me some money. And, he'd be like, well, where are you? I'm like, oh, I'm in Portland. He's like, it's a Tuesday. Like, why are you in Portland? I'm like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And, so needless to say, I fail out of college, and, I start working at a bar, bartending, working in the back of the house, start using a lot more cocaine at this point in my life. And, it was interesting, that dynamic that I said about how cool I felt in high school. I did not feel that in college at all. And there was something that happened, and I don't know, I can't think of an external event, but it was just more of like an internal change of where I just my ego got popped a little bit in some ways. Like it was less like inflated and more of the deflated side of the ego, but really didn't have I had some girlfriends in college, but it wasn't the same. I just wasn't as confident and all that. And honestly, I think that, I used a lot more as a result of that, and stay up late, man, if I was high and drunk, I was the life of the party. I was all about having fun and just like staying up late or for days at a time. And
it occurs to me, Robert, the question of what comes first, the chicken or the egg, the progression of the disease, or the progression of some consciousness and maturity and growing up and realizing I can't do this shit anymore. So I use more, which medicates those thoughts, right? And then eventually, it's a little bit of a race.
Totally. Yeah. And I think, it was evident also that like, this stuff that I was like figuring out, like, freshman, sophomore, some junior high school, like it really I got way off that track, and it really was less important for me. So really the use had a lot less meaning, like substance, like really like substance.
You put Castaneda down.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, totally. I put all the books down, I think, and the music was something that meant something for sure. But, it became less and less about the music, more and more about the drugs, less and less about meeting people, more about what I can get from them. It was a constant battle of like, okay, I need to get my Molly, I need to get my LSD, I need to get, this, I need to get that. And like, it was just like a constant thing of trying just to manage the supply I needed to feel okay. Yeah. And the funny thing was, I'd get all that stuff, and all I could think about was running out. It was like I was completely unable to be satisfied.
Yeah.
And all I was trying to do is just to feel satisfied. And so let's see. So, I got worse and worse, got really bad. And I was like, I'm going to go back to Houston, because, here's one of my first geographical, like really conscious geographical changes to try to like make things better. So I go back to Houston. I move into in my dad's apartment. He's actually sober at this point. And, but all I'm doing is hanging out with my old high school buddies that are, similar to me, going to bars every night, doing cocaine, staying up, and really it was almost worse in some ways, because there was really nothing that was positive there for me. And so I lasted about 6 months in Houston, and then I have this grand idea. I got it. I got it figured out now. I'm going to move back to Colorado, and I'm going to grow a bunch of pot. Because if I grow a bunch of pot, then I don't have to like deal at all. I just like sell it, and I'll make all this money, and then I can travel and go see shows. I can live up in the mountains.
I think they call it the geographic agriculture entrepreneurial cure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's going to solve all my problems. Yeah. And, I was 95% miserable. I mean, but, I was still able to make things happen, and come to find out it's all pretty fuzzy, I mean, it's like, I know all this happened, but like some of the details, I'm like, well, how did I get that house? And how did I get all those plants in my house? And I remember this guy, but was he real? or was he? You know,
Yeah.
like it's.
Yeah.
So I moved to Evergreen, Colorado. I get a house up in the mountains, and I have 200 plants in my house, you know, and it's, you know, I had this vision of me like being in solitude in the mountains and how like peaceful that would be. And God, man, I was just left to myself. I was like going crazy up there, you know? So I'd drive back up to Fort Collins and party up there, come back. And then one night we ran out of cocaine, and this guy, Dave, said, hey, I can go get something else. And we were like, well, Dave, why are you still sitting there? Go get it. And he came back with methamphetamine. And that really started about a year of heavy methamphetamine use, daily methamphetamine use. And, you know, I think that drug probably robbed my soul more than anything else. And really, in some respects, I'm grateful for, because it took me down so hard, and I crossed so many boundaries and so many philosophical and moral lines with that drug that it really made me hit pretty hard. And cops showed up at my door, you know, they took all my plants. It's kind of a weird situation. They said, well, we'll take, you know, you let us in, we'll take you down and process you and let you go, which they did. And so I, you know, hit methamphetamine hard for a couple more months until I pawned my car. I spent all the money I made growing pot, had nowhere to live. So it was, you know, hanging out with other people. And what do? I call my dad, because, you know, when it gets really bad, I call my dad, and I told him that I pawned my car. My dad's pretty calm dude, but he was like, get your ass home to Texas, you know. And I'm like, and I had plans to move with these two girls to Tahoe. He didn't like that plan at all. But
Tahoe.
so,
Camille has Tahoe stories, don't you?
Yeah, a lot of my addiction was in Tahoe. Ran away to go live up in the mountains to do this traveling hippie thing, just like you, and somehow.
Maybe you two do know each other.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. We were gonna move to Truckee, which is, you know, right by.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I was in South Lake, so a lot of hippies up there.
Oh yeah.
Good place to use.
I was a very snobby hippie, just for the record. Like,
I was too. Me too. Me too.
So I moved back to Houston, and this was probably the last 18 months of my addiction. And you know, started doing coke again, because I don't want to touch meth ever again. And I didn't, you know, but I was like, oh, but I'm gonna go back to cocaine, you know. And so my dad was using at the time, was not sober. So his cocaine dealer came over. He was obviously a cocaine dealer. And my dad was like, oh, he's my friend, you know. And I'm like, mm-hmm. So I like follow him out. I'm like, hey, what's up? You know. So anyway, that guy taught me how to shoot cocaine IV. And so, you know, for the last 18 months of my addiction, I was shooting cocaine and heroin, and every day, you know, all day, every day, unemployable, living at my dad's, you know, 24 years old, just miserable, just an empty shell. And I remembered I was in this motel with this guy named Caesar, and some other guy, and some fine establishment, probably like Motel 6 or something, you know. And I OD'd, and I came to and was in the shower with the shower on, and I walked back into the suite, and they were using my drugs, you know. And yeah, it was a big. And I'd had several moments of clarity, several times where I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I can't do this. Like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
But typically I go to sleep after that, and I wake up and I'm like, you know, just a little bit to get the edge off, right?
That's right. That's right.
And then, you know, that's after that, it's all back to the races. So I, anyway, that night, it was about 5 a.m. My dad was still awake, because, you know, he liked to clean a lot around that time, and because he was typically high on cocaine and Johnny Red. but I rolled up my sleeves, which were, just complete bruises. And, I probably weighed 120 pounds, I mean, and I said, Dad, I need some help.
Hmm.
And that's the first time those words had really come out of my mouth quite like that. And he said, okay, let's do it. And he'd been to treatment a bunch. He'd been to treatment 6 times probably. So again, it was all kind of fuzzy, but a couple days, maybe it was the next day, I was, my crackhead buddy drove me to treatment. We got an ounce of cocaine for the ride, and I was like 6 hours late for my treatment appointment. And, but it was interesting. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to get so messed up before treatment. Like, it wasn't like that. It was just more like, I felt like I needed to do it. Like, like I'm going, I got to do this. And so my mom was dropping my little sister off at summer camp in the same town with the treatment center I went to. And so the treatment center won't let me come in. And because I was so late. And so I had some Xanax and took some shots of tequila and went and stayed with my mom for the night, which, she's pretty clueless, but I was just, just gone. And I remember I had a little bit of dope left, and I went down by the Guadalupe River and was trying to, inject it. And there was just nothing there.
Hmm.
And I just remember like crying, and just being like, God. It was just like more of just like this defeat. Yeah. And an element of surrender, really, just like. And I woke up that next morning and I went to treatment, and quite frankly, I was like, show me what to do. I was like, tell me what to do. I'll do it.
Yep.
And, they taught me about the 12 steps, taught me about the first step in particular, started working the steps and had a profound spiritual experience there that I think changed my life forever. And I went to sober living after that for over a year. Started working in treatment when I was actually still living in sober living. And was doing H&Is, carrying the message. And, again, in hindsight, God, that was hard. It was so hard being in that raw state of early recovery. But while I was going through it, it was great. It was exciting. It did entail a lot of pain, but I was just like, man, I was excited about life again. Mm-hmm. I had nothing, And, I started, my first job was at Starlight Recovery Center, and I went in there, I was still living in the sober house, and then I was, interviewed because someone told me to go out there and interview, and they're like, well, we have a spot for you. It's the graveyard shift on the adolescent unit. I was like, sweet, I'll do it, And so that was my first kind of gig in the treatment biz, and man, it was cool.
Yeah. Even though we have to, separate our own personal recovery from the work that we do in treatment.
Yeah.
There's still some of there's no way to split it completely. I've been in the industry since I got sober, really. And, I think it's good for me to stay around guys like you. It's like, I work with guys like you. I mean, yeah. I'm around people that are constantly saying, yep, I'm a mess. Okay, that's right. It reminds me, I'm a mess.
Totally.
I think it's, and, just like me listening to your story so far, right now, Robert, for these last few minutes, it's like I've gotten a lot for my own recovery. It's like, whoa, that's right. That's how this works.
Mm-hmm.
And so, whether we're doing it for our vocation or our living or because of our recovery, it's I don't know. It's hard to separate it all out, but it is good to have boundaries. I've heard that. People have told me.
Yeah.
I've heard about those.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, like in our place now, I mean, we do check-ins. Yeah, like, hey, how are you doing? You don't get to do that in a lot of, workplace
Yep.
environments and things
Yep.
like that. Like, hey, tell us what's going on. So it's nice. And absolutely, I've got to have a sponsor and want to have a sponsor and go to my own meetings. I mean, certainly my job does not take the place of my personal recovery. But I think there's a little bit of benefit to it. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, but I do remember those early raw days, and I don't know how effective I was in this industry, but it was good for me, I think, to
Yeah.
stay immersed.
Yeah.
That was kind of the point I was trying to make.
Yeah. Yeah, God, I made a lot of mistakes, and man, I got sober, and then it was like codependency. It was just like, family of origin trauma. Just I mean, and it would just show up in like relationships and just unresolved trauma and depression and all of that, and it was really what do you call it, where both sides are true. It's
Paradox.
a paradox. Thank you. Yeah, it was really a paradox because on one hand I'm like happier than I've ever been in my life.
Yep.
And on the other hand it's like, man, there's a lot of stuff I'm struggling with here. And
You mean we're not cured when we take away the drugs and alcohol? I
you
thought
know
that was
yeah.
it. I thought that's all I had to do was just
Yeah.
stop, and then I'm better. I'm a perfect human being now.
I remember being in treatment and someone that worked there said like, oh no, you take away the drugs and the alcohol, we get worse. And I was like, what?
Yeah. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this?
I don't know if that's true or not, but I understand the point, and maybe it is true at some level, I think. And
well, we start feeling all the feelings that we had medicated for so long, right? And
totally,
it's a lot it comes for folks in a lot of different ways. For me, I had to just immerse myself in meetings, in therapy, and everything I get my hand on. Just I did it in the days of Bradshaw. So I just immersed myself in all that inner child stuff, and morning till night. I just swam in the waters until I popped my head up and could actually start living like a regular human being.
Totally. I think I read more books in my first 2 years of recovery than I've read since. I mean, I was just trying to soak it all in, which I think brings up a good point. Is like, I think a lot of the books I was reading were like, spiritual books. And I think there was this big element that I was really trying to avoid my pain.
Mm-hmm.
And, they call it like spiritual bypass, where I was just like, oh, if I get spiritual enough, I won't have to feel all this,
Right,
and
that's right.
That was not the case. I tried, but it didn't work for me, at least. And so then, I'm going to, really involved in AA and CA, Cocaine Anonymous, which I was really involved in too. And I was working in treatment. I was making all of a sudden I was making money, and, I was self-sufficient, and I had my own place, and, it was just like, wow, man, it felt really, really good. I think I'd try anything. I was really searching for something, larger than myself. And I went down all sorts of different rabbit holes, to try to find that. And I'm kind of embarrassed to even talk about a few of them, but, and then I got introduced to something called Holotropic Breathwork, as well, which was a really good adjunct to my recovery and just overall evolvement as a human being. And
so there's sometimes we do shorthand around here, and there's some folks that probably aren't in 12-step recovery listening to this podcast. I know that. So when we say first step, what do we mean? Well, we mean just the big surrender. But you can't just do a drive-by with holotropic breathwork without at least unpacking it a little bit. We did have Christine Calvert on here a few months ago, and we talked about it quite a bit. But you got to unpack it a little bit. What is it, Robert?
Yeah. Okay. Well, you did a pretty good job in your little snippet in the beginning, but I mean, we could sit here for hours and talk about it, but I'll do my best to condense that. So it's basically. There's a psychiatrist named Stan Groff who was over in Prague, and this was, in the 50s, really, when Albert Hofmann first discovered LSD, and they were using LSD in psychotherapy, and just like trying to figure out like what is this substance, and Stan sat with tons of these what they called subjects back then, and he started to notice that these people were having these powerful life-altering experiences. And then he started to notice that there was a certain trajectory to it, and that people kind of had either this kind of experience or this kind of experience or this kind of experience. And he kind of started to organize all of these findings that he had. And, and I think you'll look at some of the research now with psychedelics that's being done, is like, a lot of these people are saying that this was the most important process of my life. And so he was like, wow, there's something to this. And there's political unrest in Prague. He came over to Massachusetts and continued his research here. And then, the 70s, happened, and with LSD, and, all of a sudden it was, the devil or whatever. And so he went to this place called Esalen Institute, which is in Big Sur, California. And it was back then, and still, they still do a bunch of stuff. But really back then, it was kind of the epicenter of like consciousness thought in the West. And, all sorts of teachers hung out there. And he was resident and scholar. And he was trying to write books. And his first book was called Beyond the Brain. But all these people like wanted to know, like, hey, we want to do this. And I'm sure they did there back then. But really, I think what he wanted to try to develop what he noticed was, it wasn't even necessarily the substance of LSD. It was that deep healing can happen in what he termed back then a non-ordinary state of consciousness. Now there's several different terms for that, but and that somehow something happens in the psyche to where it's able to complete splintered or unfinished business with the psyche. And it's really this self-directed. No one does it to you or anything like that. It's all based on this idea that you have this inner wisdom within yourself. And, when you can place yourself in a expanded awareness state or non-ordinary state or holotropic state, that you gain this certain perspective over that stuff. And so
just for clarity, Robert, because most of that dissertation you just did, which was actually, I've been waiting for that to be articulated really well.
That was wonderful.
Wow, I didn't know you were that much of a scholar of what's behind the holotropic work. But just for clarity for people listening, holotropic breathwork is not necessarily or even suggested to be under the influence of any kind of drug.
Quite the contrary.
Right? You're using your own chemistry for this, right?
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah. So yeah, it is actually you can't. And if you're really going to do the work with integrity, you're not under the influence of any substance. I mean, the whole idea of it is like, you don't need the substance because you have the breath, and the breath is the vehicle. And you look at ancient cultures and traditions, and they used breath, and they used some plant medicine, but they also used music, they used fasting, they used dancing, they used all sorts of different ways to get into this expanded state. And so this is just one of those. And basically you come in, you do it, you don't have to do it in a group. Most of the time it's done in a group, and you lay on a mat, and there's music, and you breathe, and something typically happens. Even if you feel like nothing happened, something typically happens.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it changed my life. And Christine and I, we got sober together. I mean, she's a lot younger than I am, but we're dear friends, and we certified in the training together, holotropic training together. So, but we went on this world tour of these modules, and so that was a big piece. And and then therapy, and then obviously 12-step and all of that. And I turned 30, and I probably should shut up pretty soon. But I turned 30, and I started, really. You mentioned Mercury in retrograde, I think maybe before we started recurring, when you turn 30, they kind of call it the Saturn return, like in an astrological sense. And all of a sudden I got real grown up, and I started really focusing on work and job and life. And I noticed a departure from a little bit of my spiritual focus. And it is what it is. I don't know if it was right or wrong, but it was just my story. And there's in the last 5 years or so, there's been this homecoming back to kind of my heart and this space. And I had a lot of worldly success and progress and development in those years of my life. And I'm 41 now. I got sober when I was 24, and I've had the pleasure of living the majority of my adult life so far sober and relatively, mostly happy. And but more importantly, having the tools to be content, and all I got to do is pick them up.
Yeah.
And so something I'm really focusing on in my life right now is just simplicity, and that's really working.
But life is so complex, Robert. How can we do that? It's like, but that when you were talking about the first step, for some reason I'm locked on that. It's like when we go into treatment, we have a first step experience. We refer to it that, like, in other words, you were ready. I was ready. I was hurting enough that it was either going to kill myself or get some help. So everybody doesn't have the same kind of bottom, but for this thing to work somehow or another, we've got to have what I mean when I say first step experience is to say, wait a minute, I cannot do this and mean it and actually need help. And then those next couple of steps are about what you're talking about, spirituality. So it's when a lot of times when I hear spirituality, I bet it's true for a lot of people. I wonder what a person means by that. And so as we kind of close here, I'd like to hear practically, what is spirituality? What are you talking about when you say that?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is kind of experience with spirit. Spiritual experience, take that backwards, experience with spirit. So I think it's like placing myself, for me, currently it's placing myself in a position where I can be present. I can be aware of my emotions, aware of my body, and be present for other people, and try to my best to think of others.
Yeah.
And stay and this is maybe kind of complex, maybe this didn't drill it down, but it's trying to keep my consciousness in a level that's a little bit more expanded than just like me and mine and what am I going to do and my own fear and, all of that stuff. And so I think in a really simple way, man, if I can just stay connected to this, my heart, and I can be aware of my body and I can be in the present moment and, take the trash out better than I've ever taken it out before. That's spirituality.
Mindfulness training, taking the trash out well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Camille, by the way, Robert is one of these guys that's figured out how to do relationship and family and kids and the whole thing too. Right, Robert?
Figured it out. I mean, I have all those things. Yes.
I have acquired those
figured
things.
it out.
Yeah. Well, having a shot at all that is one of the gifts that we have, right? By getting out of that self. It's really hard to do relationship. It's like, what do you want? You need me? What? Wait a minute. I'm
I'm
only myself. So, the program gives us tools to have a full life.
I think about like when my kids are like, daddy, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, God, if I was like hungover right now, or if I'd been up for 2 days or something, how do you do that? I can barely do it, now. It's like,
And then we learn how to play with it because we insist on. It took me 27 years to see that one line in the big book, which is we absolutely insist on enjoying life.
Yeah.
Somehow I missed it. I don't know why you didn't point it out to me, but I've been really.
It's funny how those sentences jump out after a while.
Yeah,
Like, oh.
I'm so committed to it now that my programs manager Camille occasionally has to look at me with that really nice look on her face. Bob, sometimes you got to do some things you don't want to do.
Yeah.
It's like I'm so committed to enjoying this life, man. But like this time with you, this has been cool. So are we there? Are we sort of transitioning and are we there? Anything else?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. We like to close with ask like a fun way to close is ask a question here, and I'm going to lay this one on you. We'll all answer it. I kind of like this one. What do people misread about you? I like that one.
I saw that one on the sheet and I was like, huh, that one made me think. That's one that actually stood out to me the most, so, and I didn't come up with an answer, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, we're all going to do it. So,
what do I think people misunderstand about me? Right? Is that what you're
kind of like that? Misread or misunderstand?
Misread. Yeah. God, it stumps me.
Well, go ahead, Camille. You got something?
Yeah.
You can study it for a minute, Robert.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll go. I guess it's that I'm always like very cheerful and always in a wonderful, amazing mood, because that's like what I present out, and that, the moods are just like light is just flowing out of me. And then I go home and like turn into like this little, like get into my cocoon and have to recharge my body to be social again. So probably that.
Sure. Yeah.
The first one that comes to me is really inappropriate. It's like people think that I'm going to say it out loud just for my own healing purposes. But people think that I'll take their shit somehow. And I'm trying to teach the world I'm not. So I'm going to reframe that, because I think I need to do some inventory work. Right now I can hear it. There's a resentment in there. But I will say, I think people think I'm a big mess because I'm always fooling around and doing this stuff. And, it's like, but inside of me, I have a certain clarity about what I'm up to. And Camille will tell you, Bob is very interested in things being done exactly the way he's got them in his mind. So I think some people might misread me in that area.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I can come off like as being a little intense sometimes, but at the same time, it's weird. It's like, so I think sometimes I can come off like being intense, and I'm not trying to like jam somebody up. I'm just like, a lot of times when I get interested in something, I want to know. And
yeah,
I think they misread me like, dude, like, quit being such a jerk, And then I think the other thing is, I'm fairly passive, I can come off, I think, as being fairly passive, but, and especially the last 10 years or so, my wife would confirm this. It's like, I don't mind a little bit of conflict, and I don't mind saying some of the hard things when they need to be said. And I think sometimes people are surprised when I actually say something like that. So,
yeah.
Hmm.
Well,
deep down, you're just a long-haired hippie trying to follow around fish.
Yeah, totally. Hey, I plan on seeing some shows this summer, so
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's time to get back at it. He's going to be is fish like dead? Are fish people like deadhead people? Is it the same crowd or similar?
Well, similar. Yeah, it's a little bit of, it's a different vibe as I would say, but yeah.
Yeah.
Same idea.
Well, Robert, thanks for being here. Just for our guests, Robert will also be back next week. We're going to talk about step 6, but it was so good to hear your story, man. Why don't you tell folks how to a little bit more about Luna and a little bit and how to get a hold of you if they want to.
Okay, yeah, sure. So Luna Recovery's in Houston, Texas. It's a boutique outpatient treatment center. We also have a very, very small residential center. It's only 9 beds. It's everything we look through is mainly through the clinical lens, as Bob alluded to early on. We do really consider all recovery pathways. As you know now, I'm a 12-step guy. But we really try to take a deep dive into trauma and family of origin issues and co-occurring issues. And so we have an amazing clinical team. We've got an amazing doc. So that's our idea was just to try to build something super high quality. I think our main focus is we want our clients to feel safe. We want them to feel cared for. And we do our best to create that container, and so far, it's really great. I love what I do. I love Luna. I love the people that have shown up to help create it. And if you need to get in touch with me, you can email me, robert@lunarecovery.com. You can also call me at 832-850-2980.
Nice. Yeah,
Awesome.
look, I'd say it about a lot of folks that come on here, but Luna is really, there's like a luminescence around it, because I know you're doing this really loving version of the deep version of addiction treatment and healing.
Yeah, that's right.
So thank you, because I know it's not hard, it's not easy to get that stuff cranked up and to keep it rolling. It takes a lot of care to run an outfit like that. So thanks, Robert.
Thank you.
And we're running an outfit here too, aren't we, Camille?
We got something going on.
Sounded like you had a lot going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I'm taking off for the river next week. But let folks know what's happening around here, Camille.
A short version of the intro. We have our upcoming experiential facilitators training, where you can learn tools to use in groups. You can also get certified to staff our Deep Waters Intensive, which will be later this year, 3-day transformational trauma weekend. If you want to reach out by email, it's admin, ADMIN, @deepwatersrecovery.com, or you can go to our website, deepwatersrecovery.com, for any more information on upcoming events.
All right. Thanks, Camille. And thank you, Robert, for joining us today. And everybody that's listening, thanks for being here on the recovery crew. You're in the deep waters now.